welcome to Fire Your Boss Fridays. This is your host, Chad Passa, and alongside me is normally my awesome wife, Lisa Hart. Unfortunately, she cannot make it this week, but stick around. She should be around next week. We are coming at you with another episode filled with the insights and inspiration that you're going to need to steal back that control of your life, fire that 9-to-5 boss, and start living your purpose. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Richard Blank. Richard's story is a testament to the entrepreneur spirit, and it is riddled with purpose, so I can't wait to dig in. He relocated his entire life to Costa Rica at just 27 years old to train thousands and thousands of bilingual telemarketers, harnessing his motivational public speaking style to empower them. Today, Richard is the CEO of Costa Rica's call center, but his journey is about so much more than business. From being a renowned keynote speaker to having an impressive collection of restored American pinball machines. What a plot twist. Richard's story is unique and filled with passion. He's even known for giving back to his community by funding scholarships, and he's just been inducted into the 2023 Business Hall of Fame. So listeners, if you're ready to ignite your entrepreneur journey and live a life on your own terms, let's say hi to Richard. Richard, say hi to the folks that are hanging out with us today.
Chad, what's happening? So great to be with you. I'm so sorry Lisa can't be here today. I know that she's a gem to the show, but I can't wait to share some secrets and some twists and turns stories with you and your amazing audience.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that. Yeah, this should be a lot of fun. So what do you think about Fridays in general? Don't Fridays have a pretty cool energy?
Well, Friday is one of my favorite movies, so I love that to start.
What a twist.
Yeah,
That's
right?
funny.
And so, I mean, Friday always puts you in a good mood.
It does for me.
Anticipation is one of the greatest drugs in the world, so you know that something great's about to happen during the weekend. And then if you don't feel guilty, if you really pounded it out all week and worked very hard, you can not coast on a Friday, but run through first compared to trying to pack it all in before the weekend. And so it's a great balance that some people have during a week.
Yeah, I love Fridays, man. Always, like, you perform, right? So you put on some performances, speaking and such. Don't you feel like the crowd's really responsive too? Because they're in that energy too. It's like this symbiotic, like, magicness. And I think just because our culture is built the way it is, right? Of course, Friday's going to be the day. So, so I love your energy, man. I can really appreciate you bringing it today. So that's awesome. So you have an impressive journey. And I say that because, first of all, you're living in Costa Rica, but that isn't where you got your education. That's not even technically where you're from. Is that correct?
That's correct. I'm a very proud individual from Philadelphia. Not only Philadelphia, but Northeast Philly. I graduated Abington High School, so I have a lot of fidelity to where I grew up.
Yeah, how often do you get back out this way?
Try to get out at least once a year. In fact, I just came back, as you were mentioning, for the Hall of Fame for my high school.
Yeah.
But my family lives out in Arizona and Colorado. We all moved out once I graduated from high school. So I'm bounce around the United States when I come back a couple times a year.
How big's your family? Like, where do you land in your family? Like, do you have?
No, I'm a younger brother. I have 2 parents, a bunch of cousins and uncles. But no, I got a pretty tight, small family unit, which is good.
Cool. That's great, man. So you're the CEO of this call center, right? And I say this call center, I mean, it's your baby, right? This is what you do in and day out. Is that correct?
Well, my stars were aligned. This is my first company, first shot, and I'm celebrating my 15th
What?
year. But it didn't happen overnight. If you think about it like this, I was mentioning Northeast Philadelphia. When I graduated Abington, I decided to be a Spanish major at Arizona. I did not succumb to certain pressures that we all have, Chad, where we need to follow in footsteps in regards to medicine, law, engineering, or even Ivy League. I don't mind being honest with you. I wasn't mature, didn't have the structure nor the grades. But I had passion towards something, and I know that if I made myself marketable by being bilingual, maybe doors might open. And at 27 years old, I was given this 1 in a million opportunity to work at my friend's center for just 2 months. But that turned into 4 years. So if you think about it, that was my graduate school. I learned it not from sea level, but from the inside out. And when you sit with the proletariat, you hear the good and the bad and the happy and the sad.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that I was able to crack the code in regards to extending empathy and dignity. And by doing so, I'm able to compete with the big boys.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, the dignity. That I think that's a nice touch. It's clear you're super passionate about what you do. It's definitely not just about the money. Was there a specific turning point in your journey where you realized that you might be giving you're more about giving back, and that's almost your superpower?
It's getting older. I realized my potential. If you want to say earnings potential, that's fine. But, how many meals can you eat and gold and jewels do lose their luster? And so just turning 50
Amen.
years old and being comfortable where I'm at in my life, once again, it's paying it forward. I'm the elder around the fireside now, telling tales and giving wisdom. And so to me, it was important. You've been to Costa Rica with your wife so many times. You love it here. And you know what it's like to be a guest in a country. And so
Yes.
since I was given such positive reinforcement, it felt right. And since English is my native tongue, I had that sort of leverage. But then again, I could use it to make a career. Do I love this industry? Some parts of it. I enjoy the art of speech. I enjoy the technology. I can't stand the attrition rates or what Hollywood does to glamorize telemarketing and call centers. And there's a lot of misconceptions. And also, it's a grind. The industry can burn people out. And if you don't find the sort of thing to give you that stimulation, it's a killer job. It's a transitional job. But I myself found that interpersonal communication is great. It's a great way to upsell, to retain a client, to move things forward. And so it's a means to an end. And if you're talented on the phone, or just not on the phone, but in general, I think you have the ability to expand and to grow your network and to give yourself certain opportunities. And so it's not for everybody, telemarketing, but if done correctly, it is a beautiful form of communication.
Really can be. And there is a lot of stigma around it. I mean, I know firsthand. So, with your experience, do you believe someone, if they could really take, like you did, I mean, you spent 4 years in it. What if someone really just did the grind, right? Because I did door to door. That was one of my very first kind of, you could call real jobs, technically, because I, mowed lawns and shoveled driveways and that pulled weeds for the neighbors. But I sold candy door to door, right? And to this day, the same kind of stigma, with door to door, or like, maybe the type of job you have, but the skill sets that you learn in what you do, or what you're training these young people to do, you're probably building more young entrepreneurs than you maybe even are aware of. Would you agree with that or disagree?
Entrepreneur, you need to have the drive for that. And it's not just motivation, you need the structure and discipline. But what I'm trying to do is make people more attentive. Or when they're on the phone with people, just not glaze over, but actually show active listening, know when to use people's names, take copious notes. I mean, these are the sort of soft skills, Chad, that won't compromise ethics, values, or morals. Can I teach it a lie? Sure, if that's what you want to do.
Sure.
But if you want to properly introduce yourself to your wife, Lisa, and ask her permission to speak to Chad if you're calling into a company, giving a positive escalation where you say, hey, Chad, Lisa was amazing. She was really helpful. Do it in writing so when I call your company back, I get praise. And so since I'm in a strict Catholic country, I can't compromise certain things. And so I have to make sure that there's a healthy balance where the agent feels comfortable representing a company in the best light and making these calls. But to answer your question, my friend, everything is just dedicated practice. If Daniel's son did not practice his karate kicks, he wouldn't have beat Johnny in the Karate Kid.
Right,
So
right.
you need to put in the time.
Yeah.
And if you do focus on vocabulary, and we have the technology to record yourself because self-analysis is the best form for
Right. That's
self-improvement.
huge, right?
Then you can eliminate hedging, the ums, the ahs. You can expand your vocabulary with a thesaurus. And you can realize if you're talking too fast or too loud, or you're cross-talking or interrupting.
Right.
And if you can make that sort of structure, don't be surprised if conversations last longer and you convert more things into clients and friendships.
Oh man, could I use some training from you, my man? Holy cow, Richard. I've spent a long time on the phone, but you know what? No matter how much I feel like I'm working on it and practicing, I still feel like there's always room for improvement. Are you ever thinking about putting out a book of like your teachings and how you do this, or do you have one already?
No, the first book I'm going to write, my man, is a children's
Yeah.
book, and it's probably going to revolve around mini golf and Rube Goldberg experiments. But how about this? This is easy for you. A lot of people are too well rehearsed, and they're really focusing on that 10-minute call, so they're thinking ahead of the script or behind or what they're missing. I believe in simple physics, almost like Eos, the goddess of the beginning. I mean, she doesn't know where she's going, but she's bold enough to get out there in the ocean. And so if your introduction doesn't land, you don't anchor, so you can't pull yourself up on that rock. So to me, the most important thing is doing company name spikes if that's your first impression. Ask, how's Fire Your Boss Friday doing today? I mean, might as well ask that when someone answers the phone compared to asking to speak to Chad, introducing myself and saying, good morning.
Right.
It really knocks people out of a trance, reduces defense, and your first impression is something that they know, and you say it better than they do. So instead of just putting you into that big bag of telemarketers that try to angle their way to get an appointment, I'm willing to have a romantic death. I'm willing to properly introduce myself, say the name of your company, and stand there with my chest out. And if you want to hang up on me, so be it. But if not, then at least I know within the first 30 seconds I set pace.
Yeah. Wow. I love your style, man. It's very, very cool. I don't know if we can go too far in the weeds on the technicalities of what you do in your business. I'd like to learn more, though, about your teachings. Like when you teach this in your organization, how hard is it to get it to translate or to get them, or do you have any techniques that you think are unique to you in building this? Because your values are pure and awesome. I think that's rock solid. What about the translation from those values into the company and then coming out the other end?
Quite simple, my friend. I start with dessert first, and you know what your favorite class was back in the day. It was recess. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You were kind enough to mention my pastime and my collection of antique pinball machines and retro arcade machines. And so what I like to do prior to the first training class is to have the dozen agents out there in the arcade playing pinball with one another in air hockey. It can reduce their stress. They start bonding through play, they make friends, and then when they're in the training room, they're now contributing more than just absorbing. And I try to do checkpoints with people. I like the triple gun trainings. Just don't give me an answer back. Chad, I'm gonna expect you to stand up in front of the class, hold your paper in the left, use your right hand because of illustrators. It gives you another 15% of expression and helps you with your pausing and pacing. And I'm just trying to triple building confidence. But I got something even better for you. When people come in prior to working at the company, they fill out a resume, okay? And they put in all the bells and whistles. But man, that's what everybody does. So I'm going to say, Chad, why don't you turn the paper over and give me 3 paragraphs of a coming of age moment. I want to see your grammar, your vocabulary in English. But I also want to see when you beat up a bully, or if you saved a kitten out of a tree, or if you happen to do both in one day. Right. Why do I do this? Because I want to see depth. I also want to make a nickname for you. And also on a rainy Wednesday, I want to tell you that you're the kitty saving champ, just to give you that second wind. Yes. And remind you of where you are and where you're going. And so I can separate a lot of people that want to be promoted immediately without showing any sort of merit. I would prefer to have people without any bad habits. They could speak the English, they just don't know a predictive dialer or a CRM. I can teach that in 5 minutes. But if the kid's got a personality and he's coachable, he could be a squire to a knight, I'd rather have that person than a hotshot mercenary that comes in, jumper, cancer, and a problem maker. We don't want people like that.
Right,
and so
right.
It's very easy to give them the sort of ideas to where it's not just a job, but could be a career. Because you've been to Costa Rica, you know that if you're talented and you can earn well, you can almost earn more than most vocations. So I do have people here that earn more than doctors.
And they're bilingual, yes.
My goodness, yes. So they're getting a return on their investment. But how about this? Imagine making these calls and doing the canvassing that you did door to door, but in a second language. So it's that much more intense concentration, which is their advantage, which keeps them in the now. So they're translating compared to people that are passive in English and are just going through the motion.
Blah,
so
blah, blah, yeah.
I believe that the agents have a little bit more balance and a little bit more center when they're making these calls. But it's just for shorter periods of time, more like a sprinter. So we just try to keep that sort of areas of concentration controlled so we can get better QA scores.
Right. So on our show, we like to teach people how to steal their life back, fire their boss, and live a life full of purpose. Speaking from purpose, I think, is where we're hitting it mostly. I love what you're doing for these people and what you're bringing to them, these principles. You know, if you weren't running a call center, it could almost be a religion in itself, because the greatness that you're spreading in the world right now with these individuals, right? Because these are principles that are being applied that can be reapplied to almost everything else in their life. And sure, you're creating amazing human beings with just your version of what people should do on the phone. And it seems so simple, but I think the bigger impact that you have on the world is probably bigger than you see. Just based on my short conversation with you, if I was your student, I would feel the same way. Like, wow, this is good stuff. I can see where I could use this in 10, 15 different places right now, even with my own, children, right? To apply conversation, listen to your children, and, listen to your colleagues, and like really put a conversation together and that's meaningful, right? So it's in context to what you're saying, not scripted, right? But comes from a place of principles, not a script. So we could call the script our principles versus the script, right? Like how we approach everything that we do. And as you know, there's that old saying, how you do anything is how you do everything, right?
Mm-hmm. But the sauce that you have to put on this dish, it's got to be a sincerity
right
sauce, because you could practice everything, but if it comes across as being fake or produced,
right,
it's not good. And so I believe in spontaneity. I like when people think in the moment.
right.
Robin Williams was a genius.
Wow. More.
I don't like fake compliments. I mean, someone could tell you that, nice shirt, unless it's like super duper and you really know. But why don't you follow it up with one or two more descriptions or questions to it? Where'd you get it? Is it silk? Or that shirt looks so cool, I could see doing it here and there. Or do you ever wear it with a tie? So it's usually that second or third follow-up question to really show interest. Or if you do discuss something, just where people aren't changing topics quickly. And so a lot of the times people need to ask if they can make a suggestion first before saying something to somebody, man. Or even, may I pay you a compliment, depending if they're willing to take it or not. And so that assists in regards to sincerity, also consistency, because some people can see it as being cynical. If you only compliment somebody one time, you see the one guy in a tuxedo one time, that's the only time of the year that you compliment him. I mean, that's not right. And so I think that some people need that sort of reinforcement every now and again, because they're trying to express themselves. You were mentioning about making the world a better place. And so I think if somebody is making an effort, the greatest thing you could do is add momentum and say, go, Chad, go.
Yeah. Amen.
And that's what I think is one of the greatest things you could do, is just be true with somebody. It's almost making yourself vulnerable, because if you make yourself vulnerable, you make yourself powerful.
I like that. I like being authentic and vulnerable. The problem I found with it, brother, just to create a small argument here for fun, is my wife seems to think that I'm too authentic, and I kind of go in that direction full force. And then when I do, I don't stay on topic, or I don't stay like, she's like, you're totally rambling on about whatever. And I'll bring it home, just for the sake of the party or whatever, because you can lose people, right? So in that conversation, but I think there's a level of, we all have this universe inside of us, right? And so some of us are more excitable than others. And I think with your feedback as far as like the follow-up, and I love it, so calculated, but there's a calculation to that too. So you almost have to be, how do I say this? You almost have to embody it rather than learn it, right? So, because if I try to learn those principles, right, it's different than embodying them even in their entirety. Even if they're great, it'll be challenging unless I embody the principle is like what I stand for as well. And then you can still get off in the weeds for sure. And I think that's my weakness in all categories when it comes to that strong conversation. And I could grow in that space. I'm sort of self-reflecting right now, just so you know, on what you've said and thinking, God, how could I apply that to my life? Maybe how I handle a podcast even, right? You could see that being powerful in a podcast as well. And so, yeah, you just
Your
got me
split
thinking about a
piles,
million different
which
things.
is like, you know, surf or turf. I mean, what do you want? Do you want lobster or steak? Then you go the lobster. How many and what type? So you can keep breaking things down for yourself for priority. And usually it's
Right.
asking what you want on the menu instead of me telling the whole menu. So it's a great way to be assertive with open-ended questions. And it's almost like choose your own adventure, but you're the one doing it. And I found that conversation. And then you can add your Chad as much as you like. But instead of overdose Chad, it's adding Chad. And I think that's a great dance
Right.
where you're talking about natural flows. That's a perfect give or take, you know, in a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got this stuff down to such a science, man. I think that's what really, really impresses me. I mean, what you do though? So this is your specialty, right? And for me, hearing these words, you know, from someone that essentially you practice this art, like you're like a master of this space and connection and conversation and pauses and wow, I can already just see the power that could bring to you in almost everything that you do. And like I said, what you're teaching other people. I really hope that someday you're able, and you're already doing it. You're already changing people's lives. But this is really good stuff. Did you learn this in school though? Is this part of some of the education that you got, or how much of this is you trial and error? You know, doing your own techniques. How much of this have you like developed on your own?
What a great question. That's why you're the man, Chad. Actually, at the University of Arizona, I studied under Michael Burgoon, who was one of the founders of USA Today, the communications department. They were fascinating professors there, learning public speaking and rhetoric, conflict management, interpersonal communication. So I'm reading the books, I'm listening to these focus group controlled studies, and they're telling me their results, and I think it's great. So I got the theory, but my mentors, my real mentors, were Basil Rathbone from the 30s and 40s, Jeremy Brett in the 80s. These both gentlemen played Sherlock Holmes. I loved Remington Steele with Pierce Brosnan, or the face man from the 18, Templeton Peck, Dirk Benedict, which was also Starbuck from Battlestar Galactica. I know I'm dating myself, but I'm discussing individuals that are exceptionally glib, clever. I mean, these guys were sharp. I mean, the face man could get you anything on the A-team. And I mean, that was one of the best parts of the show. And so for me as a young man, I said, man, that's smooth. And I like that vocabulary.
That
and
is funny.
I gravitated towards it. I prefer paintings over print.
Yeah.
And so I believe that adjectives are very descriptive. I like image streaming. Imagination is 10 times better than sight. And so if you have the luxury to make your speech that much more colorful, it's going to be captivating. And at least people are going to give you a little bit of time to present yourself. And so I needed to make my speech a little bit more flowery. I had to be a Renaissance man. If not, I was going to hate what I do. And so I needed to do that 10% wiggle room, magic dust special sauce, because you were mentioning about practice, and that's great. You can practice, you know, canoeing, but every rapids does have a twist and a turn and a wild card. And when you were canvassing, you never knew what was going to happen when you opened the door. And to me, I did that as well in Arizona. I did it at multiple industries, but you know, it was really for frontier communication when I was doing international rate decks door to door in Southwest Phoenix for 10 months. And one of the greatest things is to walk up to a place, knock on a door, get through that secretary, get there and get a signature. I mean, when you really create something from nothing, I didn't do it as a career, but talk about confidence building. That was momentum. And did you mention selling? You said selling candy door to door, right? Is that what you said earlier?
It was candy, yeah. And you know what's the funniest part
Was
about
that
that
for Little
story,
League
brother?
back in the day for uniforms? Is that what you did?
No, this was, I made $1 a box. I mean, this guy, and I don't tell this story often, but his name was Ruby, and he had a gray van with no windows, the short Chevy van to the creepy one.
That sounds so
And
shady.
my mom, I was like, I swear I was 14 maybe.
Yeah, man.
My mom would let me leave with this guy for 4 hours a night on school nights
And sell candy.
and sell candy.
I did that for East Abington Little League. A box of 100 back in the late 70s. I would knock on the
Okay.
door back in at Rydell and Abington, $1 a thing for the uniforms. But good for you. Right?
Yeah,
Well, you're
well, I
okay
don't-
now, so obviously nothing bad happened. But
No, and
for
I put it
14
on
years
my-
old, they probably loved you. They probably bought two
They
candy
must
bars
have
off you.
something. I did something right, man. But I was just doing it right. And thanks for asking, by the way. Share a little bit about me. But that particular part of my life, I never thought it would have the impact that it did. It surprised me later on. In fact, surprised me so much. I just had this epiphany, and then I decided to put it on my LinkedIn as one of my jobs. And you'd never
That's cool.
you'd never
That's
think
really
to put it
cool.
on there. Because you think if you go on my LinkedIn, you see it on there. But I thought, I'm putting that on there because if you're really looking for a job, right, and you're really looking for someone to know who you are, and you talked about this at the beginning of the conversation, they want to know who you are. They want to know a little bit about how did you get here and why do you think you're special. Well, it didn't just happen, but I do believe this plays a big role in like who I am today and why you should choose me. Right? Because at 14, I did get in that van. It was creepy and I did sell candy, So, and I went for it, right? And so that says something about someone even in their 40s, right? So I think it's amazing. So yeah, thanks for letting me share, by the way. Well, cool, man. Yeah, so you went into some really crazy places. I had no idea you were this heavy and deep and an amazing person. So you blew all my questions out of the water. I'm like, that's kind of a silly question for a guy of this caliber. So
No. Caliber of nothing. Because I'm wearing a tie and I'm a CEO. My name is Rick and I'm your buddy.
No, you are a heavy
No, man, I
fella,
want
man.
that. You brought it up. I want that question right now. Tell me what that question is.
All right, you might like it. All right,
Yeah.
so, well, let me do one I know you'll like, which I'll give you this one first, but I promise you I'll get you the other one.
Please.
And this was a question we kind of debated over what we wanted to know about you. We weren't sure if it should be the pinball machines or the children's book, but now I see the power in the pinball machines. So let's get into the children's book. You mentioned that you wanted to start writing them, or it was one of the things that you might do if you weren't doing this.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you still might do it.
Oh, I will.
Is that right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, and so it's in the book, the children's book industry is often criticized for not being profitable or too saturated. Do you believe that the passion should come before profitability or when choosing your entrepreneur path? So this being your thing, this would be like a passion project, right? Mm-hmm. And then the follow-up question, what would you teach these young people? Because you are one of those people who are that's already sending a good message and projecting, training people to be amazing individuals in general, right? Would you do the same for the children? What would be the messaging you'd try to get out? I
Don't want it to be too complicated, but I want them to play. And so my idea was to do mini golf and Rube Goldberg experiments. Rube Goldberg was those non-electrical machines. Like if you played the board game Mousetrap, that's a Rube Goldberg experiment. But things that tap into one another. And so when it's rainy or when people are on their phone, I want active stuff. So imagine creating a mini golf in your home, but then using everything that's around you for your obstacles and to knock into each other. So every hole that you have could be created. I mean, naturally, I can create a blueprint of 100 holes for you, but I want you to create your own, things that are down the stairs and whip arounds and underneath things and creating tunnels. The greatest thing as a child was to build a fort. And growing up, it was Lincoln logs and Legos and building bricks or just going outside and playing in the... I want that again. Why? So your mind is just thinking. Because that's the best form of playing.
About imagination earlier. Sorry.
No, I was just saying it's the best form of playing. Like today, they have these Lego sets, and you can create the ship. But my day was they just gave you 1,000 pieces of Lego, and you create 1,000 ships.
Yeah, no, they really did. Amen.
I need that. Yeah, I need the children to break out again and to use their own imagination. And so when I'm talking about children's books, when I was in elementary school, we had this teacher, Mrs. Vancourt at Germantown Academy, and she was undoubtedly one of the greatest storytellers, and she did it through pure passion. And the way she used to do it was she would take pictures and draw them and then stick them on a Velcro board so she could take things off and put them on and allow the children to create their own. And that was my favorite time growing up because it was recess of the mind. And anything goes. And when you're children, you're still innocent. There's no sex, drugs, or rock and roll. There's still beauty of life, and people are still imagining because they don't understand depth, perception of time. And so it's amazing how you can mix fantasy with reality. And I think the ages of, let's say, 6 to 9 are the greatest years because you could really give somebody that sort of drive to leave a castle, slay a dragon, and save a princess. That can happen at those ages. And even if they don't understand where they're going to be later on in life like you did at 14, you did realize you were doing something positive. And instead of just wasting time sleeping or goofing around, this was something that was building on momentum. And I think we can not push them into adulthood or maturity or stress too fast.
Right.
They don't need to
And
lose
still
their
create
innocence.
power and strength, right, through this. You're creating power and strength, right?
Through imagination, play, and innocence.
And diversity.
All day.
Because, like you said, the canoe metaphor that you used, I think was amazing because, well, when the canoe starts going sideways, I don't care how many books you read or what information you know, you're going to have to pull on and pull from that amazing imagination and make this work. And I think you will be building the next generation of entrepreneurs with those books, for sure, because that is the rapids that we navigate as entrepreneurs every single day, and no matter, and in all cases, but definitely as entrepreneurs, for sure. So you got time for one more question, bud?
I got time for plenty more questions. I got nowhere to go
All
tonight.
right, this one.
What's going on?
Here we go. You get ready for Richard. I love you, dude. You're too funny. So you spoke, and tell me if I'm wrong about this. So, because I tried to do some digging on you, I don't want to screw anything up. But it said you spoke about finding some of your spiritual clarity in Europe during your 20s, and you openly said you kind of were just fucking off, pretty much. But there's a growing debate on the role of spirituality in entrepreneurship, right? And what's your thoughts on that?
Thank you for bringing that up. That was the best year of my life. I went to college for 5 years, right? So this was my junior year, then I did senior, super senior. So I went to Europe the fall of 93 through 94. And I stayed in Europe during Christmas break. I didn't come home. So I was there for 11 months. I was 21 at the time. And I lived in Spain. I started off in El Puerto de Santa Maria, which is right next to Cadiz, one of the famous ships, the Santa Maria from Columbus. Then I went to Madrid, then I toured Europe, and then I came back to Sevilla. But when I was in Europe, I went as far east as Prague, far south as Corfu in Greece at the Pink Palace. You know, I went to Amsterdam. And I was also in Tangier, Morocco.
We'll swing through
but
there.
But here's the skinny dinny, right? I'm 21 years old, couple grand in my pocket, Euro pass, and a backpack. I couldn't call home. This was a collect call at least once a week or a postcard, so I disappeared. But here's what I realized. The parties were there. I mean, all day, every day. But instead of going to the party at 12, 1, or 2 o'clock, I would get up early to go to the ruins, go to the museums, do something. And I realized instead of being Sunday forced by your dad, instead of playing baseball with Chad, I got to go to a museum. I chose to do this at 21. So I wanted to see the Louvre and Peggy Guggenheim and the Prado. I wanted to see this stuff. And
I didn't even know what those were, by the way, at that age, just so you know. So you were way more advanced.
Well, I was learning then. Mind you this, don't think I was walking in there that refined.
Sure.
That was the year, my friend, of shedding that skin and becoming anew. And being from Philly in the States, that's great. But I was having 51-minute conversations with people from all over the world. And so you really got to know who your true essence was and all the books that you read. And it literally was one of the greatest years of my life in regards to growth. I was able to get to a certain level of Spanish. I was really secure with myself. I made some friends that I'm still friendly with to this day. And I danced in that rain. Oh my God, was I a renaissance man. I've never in my life wrote more, read more, and loved more that year. I loved life so much, and I really haven't stopped. that sort of feeling about life when I came
So is
back.
that like the trajectory in that time? That's like,
Best investment I
yeah,
ever made in myself, ever in my entire life,
huh?
hands down.
Hey, yeah, listen up, folks. Like, do the work on yourselves for real, and like, it doesn't have to look like, it doesn't have to be the reading the books or going to the museums. I mean, do your thing. Like, you have no idea. Everything is between the lines. Even the Bible was not written in plain text. Every story has its 10 stories written between the lines in every single thing. And I think that's what Richard found here. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. I mean, for the soccer fans out there, I went to a Real Madrid Barcelona game in Madrid where Barcelona won 4-3. I'm a hockey fan. I didn't care. But I was standing there and people were saying, "You were there. It was one of the greatest games ever." I took
Yep.
dancing classes for a month and a half. So during La Feria de la Primavera, the spring fair, I could do La
Wait, hold
Silviana.
on.
I
What,
could
what
learn
does
these
that mean?
passes and dance with them.
Tell our listeners what that means, Richard.
Every
What
spring,
you just.
Spain has this huge party. It's the spring fair, La Feria de la Primavera, where they have tents and they
Okay.
drink sherry and they just the women dress up and the men. And I took this dancing class. I was the only guy in the class, which is great, by the way. You should do that too. And I learned these four
Be the only guy
passes.
in the class? Yeah, that would be great.
And so when the event
I'm
was
just
going
kidding.
on and all the guys were sitting on the side, I was out there on the dance floor learning these moves. And that's where you get swept up. That's when you look left and right and you go, I am immersed in this.
Yeah.
And you have your moment. And so, sure, people were laughing at me because I wasn't the best dancer. My friends were teasing me a bit. But at the end of the day, who's Patrick Swayze? I mean, I was out there
Oh
like
my
Dirty
gosh.
Dancing doing what I
You
had to
and your
do.
movie stars. You bring all these amazing characters in right at the perfect timing, and you just make me laugh because you nail it. That one from the A Team. That I was an A Team fan too, and that was well played, by the
Oh,
way.
you
Yeah.
gotta love the face, man.
Yeah, I never really looked at it the way you did, and so you shed a brand new light on that character for me. So that's awesome. And the way that you sort of, like you said, emulated or idolized, or just liked the character in himself and in what he played. So I think that's really cool, man. So I like the way you look at life. I think it's really really neat. I can say if you haven't found your purpose, I don't even think it matters to you, because just being here and having the opportunity to even look for it has served you well, my friend. So you keep doing what you're doing. But before we continue, is there anything you wanted to kind of bring to the table? Because we've went into some. I don't even know how we got into some of these topics, but you got some heavy thoughts, and I want to be careful that we make sure we leave these listeners with some nuggets outside of like finding their passion. With your call center, as entrepreneurs, how can any of my young entrepreneurs maybe use your service? Is that something you want to talk about at all, or do you like the philosophical part of this, or do you want to turn people on and maybe share with us who would call you to maybe use your service or not use your service?
For people that are looking for sales, appointment setting, lead gen, inbound customer support, or back office support, maybe someone that feels overwhelmed or would like someone to prospect for them and just make appointments. But the thing with myself and on the podcast, and I do appreciate that, I never try to push a seminar or a book or even force a hand to use my services. In fact, a lot of people don't like telemarketers, so I'm just trying to shed some light. But as I say, that we've spoken to people that are real estate brokers or people that deal in the transportation industry, and some of our clients are law firms and movies and music. And what they want to do is they want to offset costs, because our costs here are a fraction of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They like our skill sets because of our language capacities, especially with a very neutral English accent. And the fact that they can scale accordingly. And we do have the infrastructure. I do have the QA department, quality control. I do have supervisors. I have Richard. And pound for pound, being put on a level playing field, if I can produce just as good, if not better than corporate, well, then maybe I'll earn the account through merit. Mm-hmm. And so maybe some people have dispositions towards outsourcing and taking jobs away. Well, listen, champ, if you can make calls better than my guy in the office, you should get the account. But if I'm crushing it, obviously the client would rather earn more. And so I take it and I leave it, and I accept it as it is. And with me, I believe in blind faith because there's so many naysayers and gray believers, Debbie Downers out there. And, Chad, their N-O means they don't K-N-O-W enough about what we're doing. I mean, how could someone give advice to me in regards to second language and call centers if they've never done it? They care about me and they want me to do well, but their own insecurities are the things that are holding them back. And so a lot of people that I know, and I mentioned this earlier, are in family businesses or doing things for the money. And I think it's fantastic, but they're not satisfied, they're not fulfilled. And they almost wish that they were true to themselves just to see what would happen. Now, Chad, I was a little selfish. I mean, I had to get past a lot of parents' guilt to do this. But at the end of the day, I didn't want to live someone else's life. I really had to be my own life. If not, you wouldn't see me on this podcast today, smiling and telling you fun stories. I'd be some miserable, bald dude in Philadelphia that's got nothing to say. But I'm sitting on a wad of cash.
Inside. Yeah.
What's that got to do with anything? That's not a fun life, my friend. I mean, that's when you feel very disappointed with yourself when things like that happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, folks, don't die inside. I mean, you got to do whatever you can. And I appreciate you doing your plug, man. The reason I want you to do the plug, because I just want people to win. But I want people to win for all the right reasons. And I think with you, brother, if you can't tell that the integrity of what he's going to do for you within his business as a service based on his character that you've witnessed here today on the podcast, I don't know what will make the sale come through and why you might want to choose Richard or the people that he's training and how he's serving the community there, because no matter where you are, we're all people and we're all trying to level up. And I know that Richard has one of the purest hearts based on this conversation, because you cannot work with people the way he works with people without actually caring. You can I know for a fact you can't do it. No. You have to have a piece of you has to care about humanity, because he's working, it's a human resource business. And that part of his character should be the exact reason that you give him a shot here today if you do need those types of services. So, and I just have to leave it at that. And I love business, but I love choosing business for all the right reasons. And I think that's the right reason to choose a business. And it, I think, has zero to do with price.
No, a lot of the times I like to not be a devil's advocate, but let's be a straight shooter. If somebody only has 400 phone numbers, that's not enough to last the month. Maybe they don't have a script. Maybe the tone of their script is too aggressive. There's no rebuttals in case someone asks a question. No email template, no voicemail template, no pipeline. So I'm going to say, yo, buddies, I mean, this is where we're beginning. And so a lot of the times it's really working backwards. And, as much as I want to sell my sizzle and give the fluff, and I can do that all day long, I'm better off letting people know, because character is judged during chaos. And I don't want you calling me on a Wednesday pissed off on something. I like preventative measures. And I like to have meeting minutes. I like accountability. Because if we can do these sort of things, it will work. Just don't expect that if you hire 10 people, I'm going to make you $1 million. Maybe. But then again, we have to look at it from my perspective and from my experience with the other verticals that I have. And you were telling me, and I appreciate the compliment about my expertise and my experience. Well, oh man, I've been doing this in this industry for 23 years. And after the tens and thousands of phone calls that have been analyzed, you can almost see the patterns. And these are the sort of the things that, I'm sharing with the audience. But
these are golden nuggets. I mean, like I said, I've done my fair share of phone calls and communication studies as well. What you're talking about, Richard, you're right. It is absolutely clear you have listened to tens of thousands of calls and analyzed them and found the patterns.
Right.
There is no question in my mind, my man. The way that you laid it out so eloquently, I just felt like an infant in communication, because I mean, it was well executed, and I think it's really, really cool that exists, and that to find that purity, I think you found it, man. So if anything, you figured out the secret sauce. So good job, brother.
Nice, man. Well, I'm happy with it. And as I say, when I see people that are, right. But when you see people grow, right, and they start cracking codes, or they come to me and knock on my door, which shows multiple things. They're not afraid of me. And number two, they're wagging their tail because they either saw something, learned something, or practiced something, and they want to bring it to my attention. And when I see that, that's the kind of individual I'd love to promote, because they're doing the above and beyond. Not they want me to pay them $1 for it. As you and I said earlier, they're investing in their own future. And we must have done something to produce that spark.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, going above and beyond, because I went to this interview once, and I think I was in my late 20s. It was a sales position, and we show up, and there was, I don't know, 40 of us or so sitting in chairs. And the guy, I don't even know who he was, comes up to the front podium, and Richard looks at everyone and goes, "So what makes a good employee?" And everyone's, raising their hand, shows up on time, does his job. Come up with, I couldn't remember, just everyone was throwing all this stuff out. And nobody said anything about going above and beyond what they're supposed to be doing, because all the things that we said is being just an employee. And when he said that, he said, for anyone here who isn't willing to go that far, you can leave now.
What about that undercover boss show? Usually the best part of the show is when the boss sees the one guy go above and beyond.
Right. That's
the
another
truck
perfect
driver
example.
that knows the neighborhood people, or the one guy that tells him you're not cleaning this good enough. It's always fun when the guy was telling the boss he's not cleaning good enough, and this is how you do it. And usually at the end of the show, that individual gets a raise and gets a promotion, and they're the ones that they don't see. But I see them. The funny part of the show is undercover boss. It takes them to be undercover to know their people. Mm-hmm. That's fine, and I understand your point, but it's a little too late. You should have been in front of your face with you, boss. Leaders eat last, boss. Mm-hmm. Breaking bread with you, playing pinball with you, boss. Not undercover, it's the first time I'm meeting Richard, boss. And it's cute, and it's got its angle, but to me it made no sense. I think if someone's working with you, not for you, you should shake their hand on the first day. That's all. Nice.
Yeah, well said, man. But we are running out of time, Richard. Dude, I don't even know how to wrap this up, because this is one of those conversations that just as human beings, I'm pretty sure I could have well into the evening. So I really appreciate you being on the show first, but hopefully we can continue talking more. And I do have a couple people that I'm going to try send your way as well. So I know you'll take really good care of those people.
Thanks.
So folks, this brings an end to another inspiring episode of Fire Your Boss Fridays. And I'd like to extend a massive thanks to this wonderful man, Richard. And again, he looks sharp, and maybe I need to step up my game a little bit. I've been working on my look a little bit. I'm thinking about doing a little bit more with my hair, and I'll have to bring my A game next time I meet with Richard. But thanks for sharing your insight, brother, your experiences. I hope your business continues to thrive and grow in Costa Rica. And if we come out that way, is it possible for us to drop you a line? Do you want to break away, have a coffee or something like that? Is that realistic for you?
No, of course not. Absolutely. I'll be picking you up at the airport and bringing you to the call center for a second podcast. Absolutely. But I can't thank you enough. Shame I couldn't meet Lisa tonight, but I know her reputation precedes her. And also for your audience, in Costa Rica, we have an expression, pura vida, which means pure life. And I think if anything and nothing for your audience, the last impression I could give you is just to live your life pure and to be true. And fortune favors the brave. Do things in small steps. Do your due diligence. Test waters before jumping in. But Chad, my man, if you have momentum and you have this positive reinforcement and the stars are aligned, by all means, you should drink life and you should go for it. And then one day you'll be on Fire Your Boss Fridays with Chad and Lisa telling your story.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, brother. Man, you finishing up my show for me. That's great. So remember, guys, you're capable of more than you know. Keep fueling that fire. We're going to catch you next week on Fire Your Boss Fridays. Take care. All right, Richard.